Okay. Okay, we're going to start actually with a brain pop to give you some background information.
It says here that all these people were killed in the Holocaust. Dear Tim and Moby, what was the Holocaust? From Brian. The Holocaust was the systematic murder of about 6 million Jews during World War II. It was the worst genocide that we know of. More people were killed during the Holocaust than during any other genocide in human history. Genocide is when one group of people tries to completely wipe out another group. During World War II, Germany's leader, or Führer, was Adolf Hitler. Before the war, Hitler and his Nazi party gained popularity by promising to make Germany a rich and powerful nation again after their defeat in World War I. Racism, especially anti-Semitism, was a focus of the Nazi agenda. Anti-Semitism is racism against Jews. The Nazis publicly blamed the Jews for Germany's loss of World War I, the Great Depression, and everything else that people thought was wrong with the world. Well, unfortunately, anti-Semitism didn't start with the Nazis. It has a long history in Europe. The Nazis used Jews as a scapegoat for Germany's problems. It's a lot easier to blame someone else for what's wrong instead of working to make it better. People do that all the time on a much smaller and less destructive level. In Germany, the Nazis passed laws that slowly gave Hitler absolute control of the government, and they began to restrict the Jewish people's rights. Quotas, or limits, were placed on the number of Jewish students schools could enroll. Jewish people were forced to live outside of Germany in Nazi-controlled ghettos. The largest ones were in Warsaw, Poland. Things got more and more extreme for the Jewish people. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws took German citizenship away from all Jews. I never thought about it that way, but you're kind of right. The beginning of the Jews' oppression was a bit like segregation in the US, but it was happening to the Jews in Germany. They were forced to wear yellow stars on their clothes so everyone would know who was Jewish. And on the streets, people were encouraged to harass Jews. It was legal because Hitler was in charge. It all came to a head on November 9th, 1938, when Nazi mobs across Germany murdered 90 Jews, destroyed temples, and looted Jewish-owned shops. It was called Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. That night, German authorities arrested 30,000 Jews and sent them to concentration camps. Concentration camps were large prisons that the Nazis built as part of their final solution, a government-run plan to exterminate the Jews. Hitler was so crazy that it wasn't enough for him to be separate from the Jewish people. He literally wanted them gone from the face of the earth. The Nazis' final solution was to kill all the Jewish people whom they could round up. Whatever lies were told to the people heading there at the time, many concentration camps were places of death. Millions of Jews were killed in gas chambers at these places. The Nazis also killed other people they saw as undesirable, like Slavic people, gypsies, homosexuals, communists, and the developmentally disabled. By the time the war ended and the camps were liberated, the Nazis had murdered close to 6 million Jews, and millions more other people they didn't like. No one's really sure of the exact number, but something like 10 million people were murdered by the Nazis. Yeah, me too. It's really sad and overwhelming. Hey, you guys should talk about this with your parents and teachers. They're good for that, you know. So are friends. I know, the whole thing is really scary and horrible, but it's important to remember it and talk about it so that it doesn't happen again. It's a custom to leave a stone as a remembrance.
Okay. So time to start taking notes, okay? So Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. So some of this is a little bit of review. We did talk about Adolf Hitler, but he gained support in the Nazi Party by attacking the hated Treaty of Versailles. So that was actually one of your assignments last week, is to read a speech by him where he's encouraging other Germans to disregard the Treaty of Versailles and start building up the military. And we're going to build up our weapons and things like that to make Germany stronger again. He blames Germany's problems on the Jews and other foreign powers. He is appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933. And then he transforms the Weimar Republic, which was the government at the time, into the Third Reich and becomes a total dictatorship. So Germany under Nazi rule. So we talked about fascism in class a few weeks ago, and part of fascism is what you're seeing here in this picture, where the only thing that you are, that you show allegiance to, or that you're allowed to, worship in a sense, is the Nazi Party. So hence it is everywhere, right? The symbol is everywhere. So it's, religion is not, in existence for these people. They're not observing anything else. It's just they're all focused on being part of the Nazi Party. So Hitler wanted to create a master race, as it was called, where Aryan people, that was the name of the people that he wanted to be the master race, they would be considered a pure race and superior to other people. And stereotypically, they would be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, which Hitler was not. So the Nazi Party had a policy of anti-Semitism, which is a hatred of Jews. And I know that this is blocking the word, so let me move it a little bit. Okay. And they passed laws to limit their rights. Hitler and his party decided to destroy the entire Jewish population. Other Nazi leaders were Heinrich Himmler. He led the SS, which was the Nazi secret police. And you may remember him from the book Milkweed. He was the one that Misha actually got to see, drive by through the ghetto. And he thought that he looked like his uncle. He was one of the main architects of the Holocaust and the death camps. Also, Adolf Eichmann helped to organize the Holocaust. He was in charge of transporting Jews from ghettos to the concentration camps, which we know they were transported by train. There was something called the Nuremberg Laws. Let's move down a little bit. These were passed in 1935. They said anyone with any Jewish blood would be considered a Jew. So we could relate that to other social, topics that we've learned, because in the South, right, if anyone had, I think an eighth of amount of blood in their system, they would be considered like Black, right, or African American. So same here, they're considering if you have any blood that you would be considered Jewish. So all of your, both of your parents, all four of your grandparents, and so on, would have had to be German to be considered German. Further restrictions were placed on, and persecution of the Jews continued to increase. So Kristallnacht was Night of Broken Glass and took place in November of 1938. Jewish stores, houses, and synagogues were systematically destroyed. And this marked the beginning of the widespread government-led violence against Jews. There was something called a Jewish registry, and it was created where all people with Jewish ancestry had to be registered with the government, and they had to wear a Star of David badge everywhere they went. And remember, Misha wanted to wear the badge in the book Milkweed, right? They were also forced to live in isolated ghettos, again, like we saw the characters in Milkweed. So the final solution is the elimination of Jewish people, of the Jewish race. So it was a plan developed in 1942 to eliminate all Jews from Europe. Jewish people from across Europe were taken to concentration camps. And in the camps, they were used for hard labor or killed. While we have time at home, there's a really good movie. I think Ryan said he watched it already, but it's called Boy in Striped Pajamas. And it's about a boy in a concentration camp. So I definitely recommend watching that while you're home. There's also a good book. So these pictures are real, unfortunately, right, to show you how many people were killed at one time and then just thrown in like a mass grave. Many could be better classified as extermination camps. They were set up to kill a mass number of Jewish people. There was someone named Dr. Joseph Mengele, and he carried out experiments on Jewish people at Auschwitz. So horrible, horrible experiments, deforming people, torturing people. He also was interested in twins and to see, how things affected each of the twins, if it was the same or different. Really horrible, horrible person. And then just here's some pictures of the different camps. That was Dachau, Chelmno, Buchenwald, Auschwitz. And here's a map of the concentration camps to show you how many there were and where they were located. Gates of Auschwitz, a gas chamber, a crematorium. So after, sometimes after the bodies were gassed, they were placed in these ovens, right, where the body would be cremated and turned into ash. And the translation is, "The one who does not remember history is bound to live through it again," George Santayana. So this is why we study history, you guys. This is because we want to learn from, how this happened and why it happened and not to let it happen again. So rescue and resistance. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of April 19th, 1943. We actually read about this when we were reading Milkweed, okay? 750 Jews were able to hold off German soldiers to avoid being taken to the concentration camps. Eventually, they did lose the battle, and 7,000 were killed, and 56,000 were deported. Here's a picture of Nazi SS soldiers burning the Warsaw Ghetto after the uprising in 1943. Nazi SS soldiers leading the deportation of all Jews from Warsaw after the uprising. And if this picture looks familiar, it's because we read a poem. I remember someone wrote, after seeing this picture, they wrote about the boy in the poem and how they wanted to let others know what was happening to him. So that's what this picture is. So liberation of the camps, right? So thinking of the word liberty, right, which is freedom. So eventually the Allied forces did reach the camps starting in the summer of 1944. Soviet forces liberated Auschwitz and camps in Poland and Eastern Germany. American forces liberated Buchenwald and camps in the West. And the Holocaust, the Nazis murdered 6 million Jews. Holocaust means widespread destruction. And another 6 million non-Jews were also murdered in concentration camps. So this picture shows some of the shoes that were found in camps that were liberated. When Jewish people got to the concentration camps, all of their personal belongings were taken away from them. So glasses, shoes, clothes, watches, even if they had fake teeth, anything was taken away from them. And they actually kept everything. Why, I'm not sure, but they did keep them. And a lot of these personal effects are now in Holocaust museums. So if you've heard of Anne Frank, or maybe not, Anne Frank is a famous person, a young girl that lived during the Holocaust. And she wrote in a diary. I'll let you watch the video, but it's an excellent book also.
She's one of the most influential, widely read writers of the 20th century, and she never lived to see her book in print. or even to see her 16th birthday. We're talking about Anne Frank, a symbol of resilience and lost innocence in the face of the Holocaust. Anne Frank was born in 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany, the youngest daughter of a Jewish family. Hitler and his anti-Semitic Nazi party rose to power in 1933, and so the Frank family moved to the more tolerant city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. In June of 1940, the Netherlands was invaded by Germany, and conditions for people there, especially Jews, began to deteriorate. The Franks tried to leave for the US, but were blocked from doing so by restrictive immigration policies. Later, on her 13th birthday, Anne received a simple present that would have enormous historical repercussions. It was a blank diary. In it, Anne chronicled her thoughts and feelings, writing about her family and friends and boys, all the kind of things you might expect from a young teenage girl. As Anne began her diary, the situation in occupied Netherlands worsened. Jews were stripped of their rights, forbidden from attending schools, from shopping at most stores, and from taking public transportation. They were subject to a curfew, and they were being sent to work in camps. Faced with these increasingly difficult circumstances, the Franks made a daring decision. They would go into hiding. Their hiding place? A series of unoccupied rooms above the warehouse of the company where Anne's father Otto had worked. In early July of 1942, the Franks fled to this secret annex, while leaving acquaintances to think they'd actually fled the country. The family would attempt to wait out the Nazi occupation. They had help from a small group of friends who brought them food and supplies and kept their secret. But the Franks and others could never leave the annex. They lived in constant fear of discovery and arrest. All this time, for over 2 years, Anne kept her diary. She wrote with a wit and an awareness well beyond her years. Tragically, the Frank family's time in the secret annex came to an abrupt end in August 1944. The Gestapo raided their quarters and sent everyone to concentration camps. The Franks were taken to Auschwitz, and later, Anne and her sister Margot were moved to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in Germany. In the late winter or early spring of 1945, they both died there, most likely of typhus. The only one from the annex to survive the war was Anne's father, Otto Frank. After the end of the war, Otto returned to Amsterdam. One of the women who brought them food while they were in hiding, Miep Gies, gave him a pile of papers and documents she'd rescued from the annex. Among those papers was Anne's diary. Otto was astounded by what he read and sought to bring Anne's writing to a wider public. First published in the Netherlands in 1947, Anne's diary eventually came out in America in 1952 under the title Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. Anne Frank's diary remains one of the most widely read books across the globe. It's been translated into over 60 languages, and over 30 million copies are in print. The world will never forget the story of Anne Frank and her family, and the millions of others who lost their lives in the Holocaust.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to our questions. Okay, so if you want to take your sheet out, or you can answer on Google Docs, just make sure that you turn this in to me by Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Yeah. No, Thursday. Well, I'll write it on the website, but it's due, so make sure you turn this in. So question number 1. What is the name of the master race that Hitler wanted to create? Was it A, Aryans, B, Himmlers, C, Armenians, or D, Hittites? Number 2, anti-Semitism means A, anti-Aryan, B, against genocide, C, hatred of Jews, or D, hatred of Germans. Number 3, Kristallnacht means A, hatred of Jews, B, concentration camp, C, night of broken glass, or D, 1/4 Jewish. Number 4, Jews were isolated and forced to live in A, farms, B, houseboats, C, forts, or D, ghettos. Number 5, Allied forces liberated concentration camps in A, 1939, B, 1944, C, 1940, or D, 1960. And number 6, blank number of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Was it A, 1 million, B, 6 million, C, 1,000, or D, 6,000? And that is it for our questions and our Holocaust presentation. So we will definitely, after you turn in, then I will post another Zoom classroom where we can go over and discuss anything else if you have any questions and discuss the questions that you answered. Okay, thanks guys.